I came back to consciousness on a marble ballroom floor, lights spinning above me like broken stars. My ears rang, my mouth tasted like pennies. A woman screamed, and my name echoed like it didn't belong to me anymore. When I turned my head, pain exploded. That's when I saw it. A heavy brass centerpiece rolling across the floor, slick with blood. My father stood frozen, chest heaving. 2 minutes earlier, I had been standing calm, refusing a single demand. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten anyone. I just said no. And that one word unlocked hell. My name is Cheryl. I'm 30 years old and I work in construction. Not the kind people brag about at dinner parties. The kind where your hands stay rough no matter how much lotion you use. The kind where you measure twice, cut once, and if you mess up, there's no one to blame but yourself. I don't build things to impress anyone. I build them because I like knowing something will still be standing long after I leave the room. That instinct came from my grandmother. She was the only person in my family who never treated hard work like a phase I'd grow out of. She'd watch me sketch floor plans on napkins and nod slow and say, "If you're going to build something, make sure it can hold weight." When she passed, she left me a small piece of land outside the city. Uneven ground, scrubby trees, the kind of place everyone else dismissed without a second look. My parents called it impractical, a headache, a waste. I saw a foundation. For years, I worked days and built nights and weekends. I learned where every wire ran. I knew which floorboard creaked because I'd nailed it myself. When money ran tight, I ate cheap and kept going. When I got hurt, I taped myself up and finished the job. My family never visited the site. Not once. To them, my real value was always measured against my younger sister, Melissa. She was softer, louder, always needed saving. My parents orbited around her like gravity demanded it. I learned early that being dependable meant being invisible. So when Melissa announced her wedding, everyone called it a fresh start, a reason for the whole family to come together. I should have known better. Families like mine don't come together for joy. They come together when they want something. The venue was one of those downtown places that looks better in photos than it feels in real life. Tall ceilings, white linens, too many mirrors, everything polished, everything expensive, everything designed to look perfect from the outside. I arrived alone and immediately felt the shift in the room. The way people glanced at my shoes, my hands, then looked away a second too fast. I found my place card near the edge of the ballroom. Far enough that I couldn't see the head table without leaning. Melissa floated through the room like she'd been born for it. My parents followed her everywhere, adjusting details, greeting guests, making sure everyone saw what they'd raised. No one introduced me as anything. When people asked what I did, my mother smiled tightly and said, "Oh, Cheryl's very hands-on," like it was a personality quirk instead of a career. Dinner hadn't even been served when my father appeared at my side. Richard stood too close, one hand on the back of my chair, like he was testing its stability. My mother joined moments later, her smile already set. Elaine had that tone ready, the one she used when a conversation was supposed to sound friendly but wasn't. "We need to talk," she said. Just for a minute. They didn't ask how I was, they didn't mention my work, they went straight to the point. "Melissa's starting a new chapter," my father said. "She needs stability," Elaine nodded. "A home, something solid, and you already have one." I waited for the punchline. "There's a simple solution," she continued. "You transfer the house to her. Just on paper, a symbolic thing, she and her fiancé will take care of it." My stomach tightened. I asked one question. "What happens to me?" They exchanged a look, the kind that said the answer didn't matter. "You're single," my father said. "You don't need all that space. You can figure something else out." That was the moment something shifted inside me, quietly, permanently. They weren't asking, they were reallocating. I looked across the room at my sister, laughing, my parents glowing beside her, and I understood the truth I'd avoided for years. To them, my house wasn't my life's work. It was a resource. And I was expected to hand it over without complaint. They didn't give me time to breathe after that. My father leaned closer, voice tight with certainty. "You'll do the right thing. he said. You always do. My mother's eyes shone in that practiced way that looked like concern but felt like pressure. Think about your sister. This is family. You don't want to be the one who ruins her day. The word ruins landed hard. I glanced around the room. Crystal glasses, white flowers, guests laughing, completely unaware that my life was being negotiated like a line item on a spreadsheet. I thought about the nights I slept in my car to save money. The splinters, the bruises, the quiet pride of locking my own front door for the first time. I looked back at them. I'm not transferring my house, I said, steady. No drama, just clear. My mother's smile cracked. Don't be difficult, we're asking you to help. You're being selfish, my father said. No, I'm being clear. That's when the temperature dropped. You wouldn't even have that place without this family, he said. Everything you have traces back to us. Something inside my chest hardened. The land came from Grandma, I said. The house came from me. People nearby had started to notice. Chairs shifted. Conversation slowed. Elaine's voice sharpened. If you walk away from this, don't expect things to stay the same. I understood what she meant. Holidays, birthdays, the illusion of belonging. I stood up. I'm not giving my home away, not today. Not ever. The silence that followed was absolute. I picked up my bag and turned to leave. I remember thinking how strange it was that no one tried to stop me. How calm I finally felt, choosing myself. I took 2 steps, then I heard movement behind me, fast, heavy. I turned just enough to see my father's face twist, something raw and furious breaking through the mask he wore in public. His hand closed around the brass centerpiece from the table. No warning. No shout, just the sound of metal cutting through air, and then everything went white. I came back in pieces. Sound first, a sharp ringing that wouldn't stop, then light, too bright, too white. Cold marble pressed against my cheek. My shoulder burned where it had hit first. I tasted iron and knew without touching my face that I was bleeding. I rolled my head an inch. That's when I saw it. The brass centerpiece on its side a few feet away, one curved edge smeared dark. My father was still standing. Richard's chest heaved, eyes wide, almost confused, like he couldn't quite believe what he'd just done. Then his gaze snapped to me, and whatever hesitation had been there vanished. You don't walk away from me, he shouted. You don't turn your back on your family. A shadow moved between us. Enough! Daniel, Melissa's fiancé, stepped forward, placing himself squarely in front of me. He didn't touch my father. He didn't raise his hands. He just stood there, shoulders squared, looking at Richard like he was something dangerous that needed to be contained. Step away from her, Daniel said. My father scoffed. This doesn't concern you. Daniel didn't move. It does now. Security rushed in. Someone called for an ambulance. My mother hovered nearby, wringing her hands, her face twisted, not in fear for me, but in panic over the scene being made. As they lifted me onto a stretcher, the room blurred. Crystal lights streaked overhead. I caught a glimpse of Melissa standing frozen near the cake, hands over her mouth, eyes wide, not with concern, but with shock that everything was unraveling so publicly. The last thing I heard before the doors swung closed was Daniel's voice again. Don't touch her. This time it sounded like a promise. At the hospital, they stitched the cut on my head and told me I had a concussion. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the cracks. The paramedics had asked what happened. I said my father hit me. Saying it out loud felt unreal, like describing something that had happened to someone else. The curtain rustled. I flinched, but it wasn't them. It was Daniel. He stood there for a second, just looking at me like he needed to make sure I was real. I'm sorry, he said. I should have stepped in sooner. You did enough. He pulled a chair close and sat, knuckles white. There's something you need to know. Actually, there's a lot, he explained slowly. Over the past few weeks, things hadn't added up. Melissa had been vague about money. Payments she said were handled weren't. Bills appeared, then disappeared. He'd hired someone to take a look. What they found was bad. Large debt. Credit balances stacked on top of each other, missed payments, bills shuffled around to keep them hidden. And then there was the reason for the house. They weren't asking you to help her, Daniel said, voice tight. They were trying to use your place to cover everything, to make it disappear. I closed my eyes. Of course they were. That's not all. Your parents knew. They'd been helping her move things around quietly. He paused. I'm not marrying her. I ended it tonight. There was anger in his eyes and disappointment and something else. Relief maybe that the truth was finally out. You didn't cause this, he added. They did. The next morning the story was everywhere. Videos from the wedding had spread fast. Someone had caught the moment my father swung. Another clip showed Daniel stepping in. You couldn't hear every word, but you didn't need to. The image was enough. Security footage filled in the rest. By afternoon, I had missed calls from an officer asking if I wanted to make a statement. By evening, my phone was lighting up with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. My parents' messages were the hardest. My mother begged me to say it was an accident, to tell them he slipped, that it all happened too fast. My father's message was shorter. You pushed me. I didn't reply. Instead, I did the one thing I'd never been allowed to do before. I let professionals handle it. I gave my statement. I handed over the footage. I told the truth plainly, without embellishment, without apology. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand revenge. I just refused to lie. The investigation moved quickly. The evidence was clear. Witnesses were plentiful. The story my parents had always relied on, that things could be smoothed over if everyone kept quiet, finally collapsed under the weight of reality. Weeks later, I sat in a courtroom with my hands folded in my lap, listening as the facts were laid out. The brass centerpiece was entered into evidence. The videos were played. The financial records were referenced, not in dramatic detail, just enough to show motive. My father didn't look at me once. When the judge spoke, her words were calm and precise. She talked about accountability, about boundaries, about how being a parent didn't grant someone ownership over another adult's life. The ruling wasn't explosive. No gasps, no cheers. Just consequences. Somehow that felt even more powerful. As we left the courtroom, Daniel caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small nod. Not celebratory, just respectful. For the first time since that night, I felt my shoulders drop. The fight was over. The weeks after the hearing passed quietly in a way that felt unfamiliar but welcome. My father's world shrank fast. The work he'd built his identity around was gone. Doors stopped opening. Invitations dried up. My mother tried to hold everything together with apologies that never quite reached accountability. Melissa disappeared from my life completely, retreating into a silence that spoke louder than any excuse she'd ever given. I focused on healing. The concussion faded slowly. Some mornings the light still hurt. Some nights the memory came back sharp and uninvited. But every day I woke up in my own house, the one I built, the one no one could take from me anymore. Henry checked in often. He never asked for details. He just showed up with groceries or tools or quiet company. One afternoon on the back deck he said, "You did the hardest part already. You stood your ground." The legal part wrapped up cleanly. No drama, no backroom deals, just a paper trail, a decision, and a line drawn where one had never existed before. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for the next demand. I wasn't bracing for the next disappointment. I was simply living inside a life that finally felt like mine. A year later, I sit on my back steps at dusk, watching the light settle into the walls I built with my own hands. The house is quiet. No demands, no guilt, just space to breathe. I didn't lose a family that night. I lost the version of family I was never actually given. What I found instead was something more honest. My own ground, my own rules, my own roof. And nobody gets to take that from me anymore. If you've ever had to protect yourself from the people who were supposed to protect you, share your story below and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.